Introducing the ACORN podcast, your voice in rural development. We're here to empower and inspire young change makers, policymakers, practitioners, and beneficiaries throughout Europe. Join us as we unite the diverse groups that shape the future of rural development together. Get ready for a dynamic podcast that amplifies your voice in our shared mission. Welcome to the ACORN podcast.
Hello and welcome to this episode of ACORN. Joining us today is Mr. Jorge Spiteri, who is an administrator with the voluntary organization Maya Foundation and the Maltese representative with the International Center for Young Beekeepers. Hi, Jorge. So, could you tell us about your background and how you got involved with rural youth development?
Okay, so I was studying at the university in my last year for an architect and civil engineer. And I met with a veteran beekeeper from Safi who was so passionate and wanted so much to make this trade, leave it for future generations, that the way he spoke, it was really inspiring. And my thesis was on how these villages in the south of Malta could develop and retain their identity. And one of the identifying things of Safi was that in this village, the people mostly worked in agriculture in the past. And all families had bees for their own family. So apiculture and Safi are synonymous. And I started learning and helping the guy who was 81 years old when I met him. Unfortunately, he passed away now. He taught me a lot, and he desired to see me keeping my own bees. So now I'm keeping my own bees, and he used to teach to the young people as well. I got this thing also from him. And I wanted to create awareness of the importance of apiculture in Malta, but even in a wider context, especially with the young people.
How wonderful. It's a passion of yours then, very inspirational. So what are some of the key challenges that rural youth face in terms of accessing opportunities for entrepreneurship and leadership?
Well, I'd say in Malta, rural youth doesn't really exist because almost everywhere is urbanized. However, there are youths trying to go into agriculture practices, and there are even educational institutions that help them to get skills. But I believe that some entrepreneurial skills are missing in the courses that are more hands-on on the field. So I think it's very challenging for the youths to be entrepreneurs in such field, especially to access the land, because land in Malta is very expensive. Unless they have land from their ancestors, it's very difficult for them to have their land. Recently, we saw problems of landowners wanting to make something else with their land, not necessarily related to agriculture, so that's even more difficult for them, and that makes the land even more expensive for the young ones to start. So those are the key challenges that I see.
Yes, understandable. Could you tell us about any specific success stories where a young person in such rural areas that are left was able to create a thriving business or an initiative?
I don't know really much about success stories in Malta. However, in the news, we see some success stories of people who are not related in any way with agriculture, but mostly they are related to developers. Mm-hmm. So it might be it's genuine, but it might be it's speculation. And sometimes because I used to work at the planning authority as well, I see it that the more genuine you are, the less chance you have to be successful with these authorities. The more entrepreneurial you are, and by no means I don't want to sound as entrepreneurs are bad people, not in that sense. But if they have enough contacts, they can go around all the policies and obtain what they want, including funding for what they want, which is good for them, but unfortunately it's bad for the ones who are genuine.
So you mentioned your story, which was very inspirational, and that you had a mentor as well. How important do you think are mentors or support networks in helping the youth succeed in their entrepreneurial endeavors?
I see them as very important. First of all, if they have mentors who are veterans in their own field, they get hands-on experience and they learn the traditional way, so they know what used to be done. Then they can adapt to today, because nowadays the things have changed, okay? So, but the start, I always believe that it's a good thing to start from the traditional. Then the network is more important, because when people network together, some might help the other because they have a skill which the other doesn't have. So they can go further if they work together.
So they can get the best of both worlds,
Yes.
the traditional and the contemporary.
Yes, but even different fields can work together to create something which is more attractive and which is more successful and at the end of the day more sustainable.
What are some innovative strategies or programs that you have seen that effectively promote rural development and empower young people?
I think that there was a good intention in the young farmers scheme. I believe the amount of funding was 7,000, which might seem as a lot of money, but in Malta, in truth, is not really a lot of money, considering the fact that the land is very expensive, and if they don't have the land, it's a non-starter. So, but the intention is good. What maybe can be made better, maybe we can negotiate or make something different with respect to outputs. So because they measure how many points you get, so how the value of the project by measuring the outputs. So we can try to negotiate that better. For example, the one of bees, because I'm a beekeeper, was ridiculous. It was really low. And in order to be eligible to do something on just beekeeping, you had to have thousands of beehives, which in Malta, nobody has them. Thousands of beehives, and it's a lot. And it's a lot of pressure even on the environment. So it isn't sustainable in any way. So it doesn't really make sense the way it was. They changed it a bit, but I think there is still room for improvement. So that's one thing. The other thing is these youth Erasmus Plus exchanges. They are good because if people who are interested in these fields can go there and have an experience there, they can network with people from other contexts, not from Malta. And we might be surprised to find similar challenges, even from countries which we say that they are so rich in these things. And what's more inspiring then is the way that these countries have tried to solve these challenges.
Yeah.
So that's a really helpful scheme as well.
All right, so now you've mentioned Erasmus and networking with people outside of Malta. How do you think technology and digital platforms can play a role in bridging the gap for the rural youth and providing them with access to the resources and markets?
The digital world is very important nowadays, so anything cannot ignore it, because without it, your market is very limited. In Malta, we still have the leisure of marketing by word of mouth, but the market is still very limited in Malta. So if one wants to grow, it has to grow even out of Malta. So the digital platforms can facilitate that, because we can now export, we can now communicate with others, we can now have conferences with others without being physically there. So they can really help a lot.
Are there any particular skills or training programs that you believe are essential for the youth interested in starting their own businesses?
I think having some skills in entrepreneurship is quite beneficial, because without such skills, you might do a lot of things and it might work out, but you might have been just lucky. It was almost like that for me. Then I followed a course in entrepreneurship, a master's course. And I found out that many things that I did were similar to the content of the master's, but there were some key things that I really did a lot of trial and error in order to arrive there. So such courses would help you go in the right direction immediately without trying and failing, which is good to fail at times. The most important thing is that you continue to rise up again.
Yes. What role can government and policymakers play in creating an enabling environment for rural youth development?
First of all, I think that the policies should safeguard more what is left of rural Malta, because it seems that most of the areas are being exploited for speculation. So in that way, the government can play a very important role, but in order to do that, the government has to involve the stakeholders which are truly working in the rural environment. So the policymakers, okay, they are graduated and so on, but they have to do consultation, which is fair and truly representative of the real stakeholders. In a way, everyone is a stakeholder of the rural environment, because everyone eats, and the food comes from the rural environment. But the ones who work within such an environment are the ones who are directly affected by such decisions. So these should be the key stakeholders that the government should consult with. And there are organizations such as the Maya. There are even boards that the government have created, which is a good thing. But I still believe that the boards can be more representative of what really is out there. So even for planning, so the development planning, the board should be more representative of all the community. Mm-hmm. The MCSD as well. The board should be more focused on a balanced panel. It seems to me that most boards are biased towards just the economic side. And this is, for starters, not sustainable, because sustainability has to have a balance between the economy, the society, and the environment.
For sure.
So it should be, all these bodies should be more representative and in a way to give the best solutions.
Yes, that's understandable. Do you have any specific examples of policies or initiatives that have successfully supported rural youth entrepreneurship and leadership?
Not that I know of. Unfortunately, I wish I can pinpoint some policies which really help. The policies all start with empowering youth, okay? which is wow, which is nice. But when you then see them being implemented, they're not really implemented like that. So on paper, everything seems perfect. So all the policies seem good and seem empower the youth in the rural environment. But in practice, they fail to do that.
So how do you think rural communities can leverage their local resources and assets to create sustainable economic opportunities for young people?
I think that the rural communities, or what's left of it, have to work more with people who are near to the decision makers. They have to voice their concerns constantly. They have to go to their representatives. Ideally, they will collaborate together. So not all of them, one by one, go to a person to raise a concern. Ideally, they go as a group.
A sense of community.
Yes. Unfortunately, in Malta, this sense of community in the rural environment is still very difficult to achieve, from what I can see. So they're like competitors and copying each other as well. So if the one next to me is doing potatoes, then I do potatoes. So, which is self-defeating in the first place when you see the economies of scale, for instance. But sometimes people say, okay, so if he's doing this a lot and every time, I must be successful, so I do it as well. But it doesn't always work like that. So one has to really do market research before doing it. For instance, for bees as well. We cannot keep increasing bees without taking into consideration the saturation of bees in the area and so on, and the availability of food, especially because all the production of bees comes from the surrounding environment. So we have to know what we're doing. And to know what one is doing, ideally, one is working within a network and not in isolation. No man is an island.
There you go. So what are some common misconceptions or stereotypes about the youth that you've encountered, and how do you think we can challenge and overcome them?
Some stereotypes, especially when I went abroad, that the youth mentioned, was that like if you're in the rural environment, you're laid behind and you're not up to date with technology and so on. It might be, there might be some truth in it, but I don't think it's really the case in Malta, because as I told you, one rural environment doesn't really exist a lot. And the youths nowadays, most of them have easy access to technology. So in that sense, I think we are far ahead of others. So we might have an advantage there. Mm-hmm. And we can use it to for our benefit.
That's the advantage of being so small and being urbanized rather than a rural country.
Yes, but we still have some rural, and we can exploit it for its real purpose, you know.
Mm-hmm. Are there any specific challenges or barriers that you think rural young women face in terms of accessing entrepreneurial opportunity or leadership roles?
Depending on the sector, because some work is still like physiognomically heavy for women to do. So women have their body is different from male. Male can like naturally have more strength than women. Okay, there might be some women that train and they are stronger than men. That's fine, understandable. Yeah, exactly. So in that sense, like this cannot like be changed without a lot of effort, like you said. So that's I think natural barrier. Nowadays, the difference between men and women within the family, like their roles, has changed. So it's no longer the woman has to stay at home and the man has to go to work. So that's like a barrier which is no more. So that's good. I don't know really of barriers which can limit women apart from the one that I mentioned.
So how do you think partnerships between different stakeholders, such as NGOs, businesses, or educational institutions, contribute to rural youth development?
The different stakeholders you mentioned, all of them have different roles. So their networking can enable one stakeholder see what the other stakeholder is seeing, but the one who is seeking is not seeing.
So communication between them.
So yes, the communication between them is very important. For instance, the education institutions can like forecast more what can happen if you do this entrepreneurial model, for example, because there are studies. And the youth might not know, might not be aware about these studies. So seeking assistance from these different stakeholders is very beneficial. Furthermore, for example, collaboration with NGOs can facilitate the rural youth to access Erasmus projects. So many of the NGOs are involved in getting groups together of people to go to youth exchanges. And this can help the youth a lot to grow in entrepreneurial skills, in the skills of what he or she would be doing in the field. So
we're mentioning educational studies and we're mentioning Erasmus. Are there any other ways that you think that education can play a role in empowering our youth?
Education is very important because if you're not like aware of the things that can happen, if you're not educated enough, you can fail, and sometimes failure is very hard. Also, the education institutions can share the knowledge for these youths to become more entrepreneurial in the sense that they know what type of funding or support is available locally, and also from EU funds or from international funds. Startup funding is key for every startup, so because every startup in the beginning would be at a loss. So that injection of money in the beginning is very important. And the way to learn about them is ideally from an education institution.
Yes, interesting. Can you share an example of a youth-led initiative in a rural area that has had a positive impact on the community as a whole?
Okay, so I think I know of one initiative. It's called the Veg Box. Maybe you heard about it. And this startup has had mentorship, and they grew a community. They work in a network, and they can grow even further. And they're creating new concepts as well. Not necessarily new, but for now it seemed like something which is new.
Innovative.
Yeah, innovative. I believe the model of working within such a network is very good. Essentially, it's having some produce and also sharing knowledge, but also getting produce from different producers, and market it in such a way with a story as well, for the people to learn about the product, from where it came, and all the other things.
A more holistic approach.
Yes. Yep.
So how can rural youth development contribute to overall sustainable development in these rural areas?
So the youth in Malta nowadays, as I said, is more integrated, not so rural. Okay, so that in a sense is already very good. Nonetheless, the knowledge on economics and feasibility is very important. So that is very important for them to attain in order to be sustainable, because people like say, oh, I love agriculture, I just want to do agriculture, but they don't think about how to be feasible. So it should be, this skill should be learned. Okay, so that's important.
So, what advice would you give to young people in rural areas who aspire to become entrepreneurs or leaders?
I would give them the advice to travel and to network with a lot of people from different backgrounds, not necessarily within their own field, because there are different players that should work together to achieve a sustainable initiative. So mostly is collaboration, what I really recommend, and for them to look at the world with an open mind.
Lastly, what are your hopes for the future of rural youth development, and how do you see it evolving in the coming years?
As I said before, I hope that the government would involve more the stakeholders which are really into the field. And hopefully, in doing so, the rural areas will be safeguarded, and there will be more incentives for the youths to continue or start an agricultural practice. So that's what are my hopes, and my hopes are incidentally aligned with what I see in the future as well for the youth development as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time, Jorge, and thank you to our listeners.
Thanks for joining us on this ACORN podcast. Be sure to follow our social media channels at ACORNproject EU on TikTok and Twitter. Thanks for listening.